Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, Season 4, Baker's Dozen episode. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm the Food Professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Our special guest on this episode is Pierre Patel, President and CEO of CropLife Canada. CropLife Canada represents Canadian manufacturers, developers, and distributors of pest control and modern plant breeding products, part of CropLife International Consortium, a global federation. So Sylvain, you introduced me to Pierre, and it was a great conversation about what it really takes to make happen and the issues that are around the grains and the seeds. And, we get into the GMO stuff and all those things. There's a definitely different opinion about GMOs, but he articulates his position quite well.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, CropLife is probably not known to most Canadians, but Pierre represents a really important group. If we want a more sustainable, efficient agriculture, not only in Canada, but around the world, we need those players. I mean, I think it's and of course, we had COP last week and the week before, and I think I wasn't there, but I can only assume that biotechnologies were very much part of most discussions that were related to food systems in general. So they're doing great work. I personally think that that group is severely misunderstood, especially by city dwellers. And so I'm hoping that by giving CropLife more of a voice, they can connect with some people who just don't necessarily appreciate or understand genetic engineering, which is really an exceptional field.
Well, it's part of our mandate. It's part of our mandate, you and I, to go from like seed to table, really. So this is literally the seed part.
This is literally even before the seed.
Exactly. This is the pre-seed part. So and he's a very articulate spokesman. So everyone will really enjoy the interview. All right, let's start with how would you wrap up your week presenting the Canada's Food Price Report? I see it continuing to crop up. I mean, my mother is saying you never got off her TV, apparently, on the day. So you said you're going to be busy. But how did it, what would the comms folks say? How did it land? I mean, the fact is that inflation is still going to be with us. The Canadian families are going to pay $700 more next year. The pace of inflation is slowing, but that's not helpful because it's not going backwards and it's going up again. So tell me about how you felt the report landed with the media and
so we did get some metrics from our communications folks. So this year's report basically got a couple of good numbers. So the market reach was 597 million. So out of 14 reports, that is probably number 3. And the reason why I'm very satisfied with the 597 is because it was actually kind of a good news report. It's always harder to get some attention when you actually try to articulate some good news to the public. So you're a retail guy, you're a marketing guy. So in advertising, that would equate to about $5.5 million worth of advertising, essentially. So I think we got the word out. The people got to read more about Canada's Food Price Report. And of course, in that report, the forecast is the hook, but we always have clear messages around food systems like the carbon tax. We do discuss the carbon tax. We're a group of 30 scholars, and we have to agree on certain things. So we agreed on carbon tax. We agreed on code of conduct. There's actually a good page and a half on a code of conduct, and we talk about what lies ahead in 2024. And frankly, I think for consumers, things are going to look better at the grocery store. I'm honestly, because you and I were close to industry, I'm a bit concerned for industry because things will heat up. I actually do think that margins will actually be tighter. Not only in retail, but up the food chain as well, because of commodity prices, because of the fact that people have less cash, less money, not only in Canada, but around the world. So, and I think grocers will feel it, and they will put more pressure up the food chain to keep margins as low as possible.
The balls of poison keep on a-rolling. Not to make light of a deadly situation. There's now 5 Canadians dead.
I know.
from the Salmonella outbreak. Now,
and you know where I am this week, right? I'm in Mexico, and of course, last night we went to dinner and we were served a dessert, and underneath the dessert were little cubes of cantaloupes.
Yeah. So
so everyone just walked away.
So a bunch of people are dead, and
is it 5 now?
It's now 5.
Okay.
I've read in the paper.
And it may actually be underestimated, by the way, because with every outbreak and investigations, you don't know for sure how many people fell ill. Because I know of 3 people who fell ill as a result of the outbreak, but those cases are not reported. And so there's lots of data we don't capture during these investigations.
Okay, so Tesla today, in a related news, is recalling 2 million cars to fix them. Now, when we talk about this issue, you've been saying that the recall or the alert system isn't working very well in Canada. How do we fix? I mean, it feels like that's not fixing the problem. The problem is in the fruit itself. There's got to be a way to, maybe we should groceries should stop buying melons, because if 5 Teslas killed people in this country, nobody'd be selling Teslas anymore. Like I'm shocked at the ambivalence of death around this issue. Like
I know.
Car company, if a car was killing 5 people, you wouldn't sell that car anymore, and people would be hauled in front of Congress or the Parliament. It doesn't seem to be the case. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'm pretty sure we shouldn't be selling a product that isn't secure, isn't safe.
There's no such thing as zero risk. You know that for anything in life, there's always a risk somewhere, and this is food, so systems are pretty complicated and a lot of things can happen. And so I've always advocated for a better risk communication system in Canada.
Wow.
And to me, the CFIA regulators have to engage with the public directly to make sure that they can inform people as quickly as possible when there's an outbreak, especially in times where people don't listen to the news. They're on vacation. They're away.
Yeah, you're not going to fix that. I mean, you're not going to fix that system for all the reasons you're just about to say. I think you got to fix it differently. I think you got to say, listen, how many people have died from pork?
You would actually ban imports of these products forever?
How many people? Let's look at the history of pork. So at one point, right, you had to really cook your pork because there was a problem with the pork. Remember that? Yep. How many people have died from that in Canada today, this year? I'm going to say 0.
My guess would be 0, yeah.
So they fixed it. Like, this is fixable, right? Or don't sell the product. Like, I don't think you're ever going to get to a point, ever.
Well, it's like irradiation for meat. It took, how many years did it take to actually for people to accept the fact that by irradiating meat, you significantly reduce the presence of pathogen in ground beef? But it took years and years for the CFIA and Health Canada to approve irradiated meats. Why? Because of perception. So I actually understand your point of view, Michael, and I agree with you. Just make sure you fix the problem. But the solution may actually represent a greater threat, perceived threat to the population. So that's why often regulators stand, well, let's go on site, conduct some audits, make sure that these people don't put crap on melons. That's basically what it is. And on-site audits are very important. That's the solution so far. But to be honest, yes,
it's not working.
Of course,
it's not working.
Exactly. And so, but again, I would say, when people don't understand how risks are mitigated across the supply chain, and they start learning how things are done, it scares more people than it reassures them.
But it creates innovation. Like, I don't want to draw this out too long, but look at who we've interviewed around vertical farming, indoor vertical farming, and how safe that is versus getting greens from California. Same issue, right? Greens get recalled all the time. They've solved that issue. That's all I buy now in greens.
But there are risks. I mean, there was a major greenhouse operation close to Hamilton who went under because of a recall at Loblaw. So there are always risks. And we need to accept that. Now, how do you mitigate those risks is really a tricky path, I think. It's not just plain and simple. You either ban, you basically penalize financially farms who don't follow protocols at all, or you just try to make sure that they do their jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
You're not convinced.
Well, I listen, speaking for myself, and by the way, this is not a hard decision for me because I never liked melons to begin with. I thought they were flavorless nothings. I'm not eating another melon.
Actually, I'm stunned by the number of people who have told me this. That I don't eat cantaloupes. I don't eat melons.
The problem is, as I read through, because we don't know who passed away, but the problem is that they were served to people in institutions like daycares.
Over 65, yeah.
Right, so they're just feeding them just whatever.
Tasteless stuff.
You know, anyway, bland, tasteless, deadly product. Just doesn't fit on my table, I'm afraid. Just they don't go together. I don't know. Just me.
Right.
I don't know. What do you think, moving on to more happier things, what do you think about this new McDonald's format, this CosMc? They've launched a whole new format, and it's pretty exciting looking. Its first location is in Illinois, because that's near where their headquarters is. And it's trying to capture the customized pick-me-up drink segment in the afternoon. They're talking about more locations, DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth, $100 billion category, growing. They're trying to fill in, I guess, a gap in the middle afternoon. I guess they're going after coffee or Starbucks, right? Your pick me up. So, did you see any pictures of this, and what do you think?
Yeah.
It's been a long time since McDonald's has made a move like this, right?
I don't understand the strategy. To be honest, I'm still trying to figure things out. So why do they need to do this now? Is it a generational thing? Is that they're missing out on a new crop of consumers? It seems to me that this is all about making the brand more useful. That seems to be the case. I don't know. How do you read McDonald's strategy yourself?
Well, I think that's it. I think they're trying to fill out a day part in the language of the food service, and I think they're going after younger. And the world has changed. There are probably more drive-ins. It looks fun. Who knows?
And perhaps they need to renew their brand. So they want to make a big splash out of it, and it seems to be working because a lot of people are talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's a strategy around day part segmentation. I mean, I think they've kind of assumed they can't get people into McDonald's in the middle of the day because they're either considered breakfast, lunch, or dinner. They're not considered that midday thing, and this is one way for them to do it. And good for McDonald's for trying different things. What intrigues me a little bit is how closely it's branded to McDonald's. So when you look at the signage, it says it's McDonald's. So it's not stealth, like, hey, we've got a whole new thing come in. So
it's separate. That feels separate from
Yeah, so you would think you'd launch a new brand that you got two paths. One would be to integrate. The other would be launch a whole new brand. So you go to capture people who don't, like myself, go to McDonald's. So I'd go, oh, there's CosMc. I never heard of it. I'm going to go. I might not even connect the dots. It's McDonald's. But they didn't go down that path. Their signage clearly has the new logo, and then below it, this is a McDonald's product.
Exactly.
So anyway, it's very interesting to...
To me, what's always intriguing when McDonald's does something like this is how they pick the location for their first. Like the McPlant was Canada. Mm-hmm. They used Canada as a lab for their plant-based strategy. Now, in this case, it was
right near their
Chicago or close to Chicago, I think.
Yeah, right near their headquarters, so they keep an eye on it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But it's always intriguing. To me, that's a statement. The McPlant using Canada as a lab for their McPlant was to me telling. It means that they're exploring but not committed to it.
Yeah.
But in this case, I feel a stronger commitment. I don't know about you, but I think they're committed to this new line of stores, if you will.
So the world of the vendor code of conduct continues to be a dynamic one. You wrote an article and published an article around basically around too much regulation getting in the way of the creative.
Oh, you read that?
I did, and
I wrote it on a plane on my way over to Mexico.
Well, I thought of you, and I wanted to ask. Of course, I thought of you. You wrote it, but I wanted to ask. On the one hand, you warn against over-regulation or too much regulation. On the other hand, and I don't want to put words in your mouth here, that you're a fan of if they're not all going to go sign it, it being the Grocery Code of Conduct, then it should be inflicted upon everyone. It should be a regulation. So the two seem to be at odds with each other. On the one hand, you want, now that, maybe not everybody's going to sign it as it exists. That's what our friends at Loblaws and Walmart are saying.
But the regulation piece I wrote has nothing to do with the Code of Conduct. To me, the Code of Conduct is more about ethics and, conduct.
But it's going to be regulation. Like, the next stage of the process, I think that you might, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it feels like you're advocating, well, if they don't all voluntarily sign it, it must be regulation, must be regulated. It
must be mandatory, yeah. Yeah.
You're not worried. You're not worried.
The piece was more focused on labeling, food safety, because I spoke to a bunch of manufacturers in Toronto. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, and they're incredibly concerned by the amount of new regulations coming in that are increasing costs. Mm-hmm. So I think the Code of Conduct is a separate issue altogether because it's more about behavior within the supply chain. The regulation piece I wrote is very much about the government changing rules for the entire industry around things like labeling, things like procurement, that basically just pushes costs higher for everyone. Okay, the Code of Conduct is not about increasing costs for everyone. It's about spreading the joy around the supply chain. It's very different. And to me,
not according to the folks who aren't going to sign it, by the way.
Well, and I actually challenged Loblaws on that one. I mean, so they contacted me and said, why are you pointing fingers at Galen Weston? Well, I just want to know where your $1 billion came from. I mean, can I at least see the math behind your $1 billion?
The professor says,
if Galen Weston goes on screen and tells everyone it's going to cost you more money, can I see the math? It's like Jim Stanford. Stanford went to Ottawa this week. He pissed me off, to be honest, because he basically, again, he said, oh my goodness, grocers are going to make $6 billion in profits. Okay. He's using StatsCan's data, which is a hodgepodge of companies. We don't know where that data set comes from, how it's structured. I actually asked him the question on X, never answered. So last night, even on vacation, I thought, let's get to the gross profit margin, show everyone exactly what's going on, and there's no profiteering, zero in 5 years. Now, is it comfy for grocers in Canada? Yes, it is, because you compare to UK, if you compare to the US, margins are much higher, but they've been stable. You shouldn't be blamed for markup on makeup. You just shouldn't. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to make money selling makeup, but are they profiteering with sales on food? I don't think so. Even when you look at gross profit margins for the entire company, there's still no evidence of profiteering at all. So that's why I think there's a lot of misinformation out there that leads to believe that perhaps the Code of Conduct will cost money or not cost money. And I think Galen Weston played that card, the same card as Jim Stanford. Just throw some out there. I think that's
Galen in the same category as Jim Stanford.
Galen Weston is a serious businessman. He understands numbers.
Very successful.
Don't play the Jim Stanford card. Just don't. You're not at that level. Galen Weston is a smart man. He shouldn't be doing that. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to our bracing conversation with Pierre Patel from CropLife Canada.
All right. Joining us today for our show is Pierre Patel, President and CEO of CropLife Canada. Welcome, Pierre.
Well, thank you very much, Sylvain. Happy to be here.
So I suspect that most listeners don't know much about CropLife, but it is a very important organization, both in Ottawa and around the world. So tell us more about CropLife's mission and the key roles it plays in advocating the agricultural industry in Canada.
Yeah, happy to do so. And you're right. The average Canadian probably doesn't know much or need to know much about crop life per se, but they probably know about what our members produce. And the members of Crop Life Canada are those companies that produce the seed technologies that farmers use and the crop protection products. So whether it's for agriculture or public health or stuff they use in their homes to protect themselves, those are the products that our members produce. And
Mm-hmm.
our role at CropLife Canada is really to help those companies navigate the regulatory environment here in Ottawa and around the country to make sure that they can get those products registered and approved and into the hands of those that need them.
Mm-hmm. And you've been president and CEO for how long now at CropLife?
Well, I've been with CropLife for 15 years now. It's hard to believe. And in this role for the past 6 years.
So CropLife's been around 1952. What's changed over the years? What are the most significant changes and developments? You've been there for not the entire time, but looking back at the through the pages of the history of the organization. What are those big milestones that you'd highlight?
Yeah, for the record, I wasn't even born yet. The association started, but ironically, we just celebrated our 70th anniversary this year. And so we dug up some of the old incorporation documents and briefing binders and board records from 1952 and 53, and it was pretty funny to watch. I mean, some of the budgetary lines were quite a bit different than they are today, as you can imagine. But interestingly, some of the challenges and the work plans that they were talking about back then were not that dissimilar. The regulatory environment was just being created for crop protection after the war, and there was a lot of potential for these products, but they had to be regulated, and they had to be make sure that they were safe for the environment and safe for people. And so our members were working with government at the time, and then there was even starting to be public. Not misconceptions, but sometimes the public had questions, right? And so making sure that we had those answers. And so it was interesting to read some of those older materials and realize that they were not that dissimilar. But certainly in the years that followed that, our industry made sure that not only were the products that they were bringing to the government for approval, that they're safe and effective, but we also started to implement stewardship programs to make sure that the products were properly cared for during their life cycle. And so, at the end of life, those plastic jugs that held that pesticide, for example, we developed a container recycling program long before blue boxes ever arrived in the cities, and decided that industry we were going to manage those products ourselves. And this started in the 80s. So that's just one example of a stewardship program that we brought in through those years.
I think of the 1950s. The image that comes up in my mind is those kind of grainy, weird, colorized pictures of people in lab coats, like the dawn of science in some ways, or the dawn of what we call modern science. I mean, that was it feels like that was an interesting time to be around, and that public perception was like, we're going to solve everything because we have science now.
That's right. Could you give us, Pierre? Could you give us some examples in terms of the tools that you've provided the farmers in recent years to make them more productive and sustainable? Other than the example you just gave us, so what are some of the tools you have actually been able to provide to farmers in recent years to help our agriculture evolve?
Yeah, well, I think what people don't realize, like everyone can relate to an apple that they buy that has a wormhole through it, and or lettuce that starts to rot in the fridge after a day or two. And so people, I think, intuitively understand what insects and diseases and fungus can do to their own produce that they buy, but they don't often maybe take a step back and picture. Imagine if this was a field full of lettuce or an orchard with hundreds and hundreds of apple trees, and how do you stop those insects and diseases from ravaging that and creating tremendous food waste and food inflation? So the tools that our members produce are continuously evolving, and so the pest pressures change every year. The technologies that you need to control them have to change, and so over the years, there's been continuous investment. Our sector is one of the highest investors of gross sales back into R&D, always looking for the next solution to the pest, whether it's insect or disease or weeds. And so there's been a number of specific examples. So one of them is the advent of genetic modification. So in some circles, that's still a controversial word, but as far as we're concerned, it's been a huge success, tremendous input to the agriculture sector. It's allowed things like no-till agriculture, where we used to rip up the soil every year to control weeds, and now in most of Western Canada, that practice has almost disappeared, and they seed directly into last year's waste on the field, and it keeps the carbon in the soil. It prevents soil erosion. It's been a tremendous boon, and that's been because they've had access to herbicide-tolerant crops and herbicides to control those weeds. That's just one example, but those pest pressures are constant, and with climate change, we're seeing more and more pests that used to be more southern climate problems are starting to make their way into Canada. And so those pressures are going to continue to be significant.
So as you say, you're really talking about all the solutions that you provide for farmers. And we've had lots of farmers on. We've been blessed with lots of farmers on the channel talking about the work they do. And one of their frustrations, I don't know if the frustration is they're a relatively small percentage of the population creating a tremendous amount of food. So their voice isn't always that amplified. And part of your job is amplifying and talking to people and governments, but of course also citizens. So let's talk about, and you mentioned it a couple of times, and in some circles there is controversy over some of the products that are used, rightly or wrongly, but that's the narrative. So how do you talk about that and work towards what objectives you have to clearly articulate the benefits of your product versus the perceived risks or any of the other things that come along with using the products?
Yeah, if I look back, 20 years ago, I think the industry felt the science will tell the story. If we just tell people the science of these things and how safe they are and how many regulatory hurdles they have to go through, then people will understand.
Yeah.
And I think what we realize is that because, like you mentioned, 98% of the population have very little contact with primary agriculture, they didn't really see the benefits themselves. And so whether it made a farmer's life easier and more sustainable and more productive, that really didn't hit home for most of the public. And so we really shifted to trying to speak in terms that average Canadians can understand and that they can relate to. And so some of the examples I gave about, the apple with the worm, or you're buying an $8, we heard a lot about the $8 head of cauliflower a few years ago. Well, the last thing you want to do is pay that kind of money and then have it rot in your fridge. And so I think we've tried to relate it more to what people can relate to every day. And so diseases on your fruits and vegetables, food prices. I mean, the food affordability. Sylvain, you talk a lot about this in the last while, and I think we try to demonstrate that these tools that our members produce save thousands of dollars on grocery bills every year, and we have data to back it up. We also talk about what it means for the economy in Canada and how much agriculture contributes to the GDP and creates wealth and innovation and science, and so we're trying to really speak in terms that are less academic, more relatable to the average Canadian.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you're part of a large international organization, I think, CropLife International. So talk about that a bit. Was CropLife Canada kind of founded as an independent and joined a large organization, or these are obviously global issues, and you're the folks who belong as members are big global companies, not all of them, I suppose, but some of them. So talk about the international aspect of the work and how it, how you go out and grab innovation and ideas, and then how you fuel that, and just talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, CropLife, the brand, the name hasn't been around that long, maybe 20 years.
I see.
Before that, we had various names. Here it was, Crop Protection Institute. and around the world they had different names. And I think, like I said, around 20 years ago, the organizations decided we should probably have some commonality in terms of naming and mandate. And so that's where the brand was born. And CropLife International is kind of the umbrella organization, and it's companies that have a real global footprint. So some of the really large ag companies are part of that.
Who would be your members? Like like a Bayer comes to mind. Like who would be kind of your members? Are those folks like that?
So on the international front and in Canada, the large players would be the BASF, the Bayer, Syngenta, Corteva. Those are the four big ones. And then other companies to a less degree. And then in Canada we have 42 members. So many distributors, smaller companies, Canadian only companies are also part of the mix.
Okay.
But that international reach really allows us to understand what's happening in different parts of the world, what works, what doesn't work, what some of the threats are coming from other parts of the world in terms of either anti-technology sentiments that are, like in Europe, we see a lot of that. And so what are some things that we can do in Canada to guard against that and to make sure that Canada's export and the role we play in feeding the world can continue into the future. And
so, I guess it's a global pest ecosystem as well. As you said, with climate change, we've got new pests coming in all the time. So I guess you get ahead of that, particularly, I suppose, particularly with your American colleagues. Yeah, some of these pests moving north.
Yeah, certainly the intelligence sharing is important, and just recognizing Canada, we will never grow, unless climate change really gets bad, we will never grow citrus and bananas and these things. And so
no avocados grown in Winnipeg.
No avocados. Yeah. And so those parts of the world that do grow those crops for us, understanding the pest pressures they face in the tropics, I mean, it's unbelievable down there. And so making sure that the tools that they're using are safe and effective as well. And so that international perspective really helps us understand some of those pressures around the world.
So a long history and a global history. What are some of the more recent projects or initiatives that you've been working on? I think there's lots of. I could see on your desk a couple of sets of files. One is talking to government about initiatives, even sustainability. I'm sure is a top file for our government, but also, as you say, public perception. That's got to be a big part of what you do and known to be done. So talk about big projects that you're really happy about or proud of that are going to have a big impact on agriculture in Canada.
Yeah, maybe a couple things. Certainly a technology that's coming and is here is gene editing and that whole
CRISPR, right? Is that CRISPR, Sylvain talks about CRISPR a lot. Yeah.
That's one mechanism of gene editing, but it's exciting in the sense that here we now have a way of modifying the crops, but in a much more precise way and a much less expensive way. The traditional GMOs are reserved really for the large multinationals, just because it takes years and years and millions of dollars to actually achieve what you're trying to achieve. What gene editing does is that opens up that ability to work within the plant's own genome to public researchers, small companies, really field-specific needs. And so that's very exciting. And Canada is just finally paving the way for those products from a regulatory perspective. It took a few years.
Is there a feeling in government that you're moving? It's funny, right? As you say, you go from an industry that was working in decades on improvements to years. Does it feel sometimes that you have to counter the notion that it's happening too much, too fast, too soon? Is that some of the discussion?
Well, I think a lot of countries, including Canada, we're trying to figure out, are these new techniques, are they more analogous to GMO technology, or are they more analogous to traditional plant breeding that happens every day?
Right.
And I think what Canada has decided is that it's somewhere in the middle. For a lot of traits, it's really no different than if you did it through crosses and traditional breeding. And then in other cases where you significantly change the plant, the type of food, then maybe it needs a bit more scrutiny and a bit more data. And so I think we've found in Canada a really nice approach to managing this new technology. On another front, so that's the science side that's really exciting. On some of the public communication, we go an initiative called Real Farm Lives, and it really allows the voice of the farmer to be elevated and to speak directly to Canadians. And so we've had 3 seasons of this and multiple families from different parts of the country. And the feedback we get anytime anyone watches it is just phenomenal, because it's the farmer talking from their perspective with their family. And it makes, I think, average Canadians realize what they may have heard about farming and corporate farm and large multinational farms is really not the case in Canada. Yes, they may be large, but they're still family farmed, and seeing the families with their kids and passing the farm on to the next generation and the care they have for the land and what they do has been very rewarding for us. And I encourage any Canadian that has questions about farming and agriculture to check out Real Farm Lives. Where
would we find that? Is that, we'll put a link in the show notes. Is that a YouTube show? Where would we see that?
Yeah, they're kind of bite-sized video clips. Some are longer, some are shorter. But yeah, realfarmlives.ca, and there's a whole host of different types of families to look at there.
That's great, Pierre. I guess, lastly, what are some of the key takeaways or messages that you would like to convey to our audience in terms of what CropLife does, some of the things that we do hear about genetic engineering or gene editing? What are some of the things that you would want our audience to know more than anything?
Well, I think, like was referenced before, with only 2% of the population really involved in direct agriculture, I think it's to have an open ear, listen to those voices of the farmers and understand the perspectives that they bring. And I think understanding that these technologies that we talk about, while they may sound mysterious, they're not really. And there are numerous avenues to get more information about them. And they do bring home important benefits to every Canadian. And especially in this era of food affordability, the crisis around food affordability, food waste, I think people will see a direct link between those things that are important to them, and also on climate change, right? Some of the products that are being introduced and the farmers use on a daily basis are directly contributing to carbon sequestration in the soil and helping with the climate change crisis that is near and dear to most people. So I think if people have an open mind and look for the information, they'll realize that agriculture is a solution to many of the things that are important to them, whether it's environment, economics, or just their own affordability at home.
Well, Pierre, thanks so much for joining us on the Food Professor podcast. Now, if folks want to get in touch, are you a LinkedIn guy? And what are some links, whether it's your website? You've already thrown out a couple of websites, which is great, but any other places we should go to learn more about your organization, what you do, and get in touch?
Yeah, for sure, realfarmlives.ca is one for people that have just want to learn a little bit about agriculture, and if you've got a little bit more in-depth curiosity, our website, croplifecanada.ca. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and then we share a lot of important information through that channel as well.
All right, well, perfect. So once again, listen, thanks for taking the time to join Sylvain and I on the Food Professor podcast. Really treat to get to listen to you and get your perspective. And I wish you continued success and a great rest of your week.
Well, thanks very much, Michael and Sylvain. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Take care, Pierre.
Okay, so we're back. Great interview. I think we did another thing that we can continue to enjoy. Now, I wanted to talk about cruel and unusual punishment. Did you see this in the U.S.? A woman who threw a hot burrito bowl in a Chipotle worker's face, or that didn't like the way it was prepared, she was sentenced to either serving 3 months in jail for assault, but could shorten her sentence if she agreed to work in the fast food restaurant herself.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding me. So Emily Russell, the victim
Who's the judge? Brilliant move.
Emily Russell, the victim of the burrito bowl attack, says she's very happy, truly happy with the outcome. So there you go. Instead of serving time in the penitentiary, she has to work in a fast food Chipotle and get to see what it's like to be on the other receiving end of this ridiculous
That's a great
behavior.
Sentence. Bravo.
Hey, right? Isn't that great?
Yeah, that's a good move.
I thought, what a great way to wrap up this episode of the show. But just brings it all together. Anyway, so lots of stuff continues to go on. Let's leave it there. And we got one more show left in this calendar year. But of course, we'll be back in 2024. And we've got one more guest coming up. We got lots of great guests coming up next year. I'm Michael Blanc, consumer growth consultant, podcaster, keynote speaker, and you are?
I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
All right, Sylvain, you're in parts unknown, so safe travel back. Safe travel back to Halifax, and I will be recording live from Vancouver next week. So I'm on the road again for the last time this calendar year. But until we see each other again on screen, safe travels, my friend, and enjoy your time with your family.
All right, take care.